Yo, what's up guys? So, doing a reshoot of the relative humidity video. We're going version 2. I'm doing this because I'm changing the range slightly, tweaking it. In the last video I said it was 13 to 15.5. That's in grams per meter cubed. Only going to say that once. So grams per meter cubed is what I measured in. Could have done it in ounces. Doesn't really matter. I got a calculator that kind of sorts that out for you. So don't worry about that. We just need to know the numbers when you use the calculator. Need to land within whatever that new range is going to be. That new range, I think right now what I want it to be is 12.5 to 14.5. The reason I'm doing this is because a lot of humidity measuring devices have a plus or minus 4%. I guess that's pretty common for my research. If you're buying a device, try to get one that's 1%. So obviously 4% matters, and the higher the temperature, the more water capacity can be held. Well, the more water capacity it has. And that 4% will really matter when you get into like 70 to 80 ranges. So if you're in higher temperature areas, that would really matter for you, and you're going to want that 1% versus that 4%. And who doesn't want more accuracy? Anyways. So relative humidity, main reason I'm making this video, and I'm trying to condense this down, so I'm going to be moving pretty fast. The last one was 15 minutes. I'm trying to get this one down. The whole reason I'm talking about this is because I see on forums, Twitter, Pravada forums, lots of people talk about relative humidity and they just list a percent. Now there's two major points to address there. One of those points is that everybody is assuming 70 degrees, so that's why we're not listing temperatures, or why we're not listing, temperatures. And the other one is that using a temperature and a humidity, you can have a lot of different combinations to end up with the same amount of water in the air, the same absolute. So it's important that we understand that. Now that said, to talk about relative humidity, you always need to have a percent and a temperature. That is because you can't actually come up with any actual number without both of those. And obviously people's humidors can be at different temperatures. Some people don't have temperature controlled humidors. And so the two problems here are that if we're assuming 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that issue is that assuming 70 degrees and everybody's not 70 degrees, that's one of the problems. And then the other end is that if we are, then you got to convert. So if you're at 72 and somebody's at 70 and you list a percent at 62 or 78 or whatever it is, doesn't matter, at 70 degrees, then somebody has to say to themselves, oh, my humidor's at 68 degrees. What does that percent equate to in 68? And the other issue there is if people don't understand that there's a difference in percent versus the temperature, there's a massive difference, people might be just setting their humidors to, oh, everybody says 65% or everybody says 70. So I just set it to 70 and they don't know they're at 75 degrees, and that's a vastly different thing than if they were at 65 degrees, and they can ruin their cigars. Super important. Shouldn't be overlooked. Anytime we talk about these numbers, we need to be talking with both of them, percent and temperature. So moving on from there, the reason why I'm doing this is because when we taste food, our taste buds perceive flavors within certain temperature ranges. Our taste buds are designed to work within a certain range. When that range is too high, certain flavors will dominate the spectrum, and then if you bring it down into a lower temperature, other flavors will come back into play. What that means is that when you are smoking a cigar and it's too hot, you actually can't perceive a lot of the flavors in the cigar. So the whole concept here is you run a higher humidity in your cigar, which combats the ember heat, allowing you to have a lower overall smoke temperature that you're drawing into your mouth, which helps you actually perceive all the flavors in the cigar. That's why humidity is so important to cigar smoking. And this is smoking humidity, to be clear, not storage humidity. Those are very different things. I have no experience with aging or long-term storage. I mean, I've stored cigars for a year and a half-ish now, but I have a quick turnover humidor. I smoke things when I get them. I don't have experience with aging. I have been in discussions with a counterpart of mine that does these same experiments in Japan, and he says to store at 11, and he likes to smoke at 13. I will take his word for storage, but in my humidor, since I do rapid turnover, I'm just storing it whatever I'm experimenting at the time. My favorite right now is about 14. Like I said, his is 13. And this range of 12.5 to 14.5 is intended as a preference range. So just like he likes 13 and I like 14 right now, that can change. And that can also obviously be different per individual. You may like the flavors better at 13, you may like the flavors better at 12 and a half, anything in between there. But I find that cigars don't react to humidity until about 12.5 till about 13, in somewhere in there roughly. The 70-70 rule that we all know is 12.8. So right in between 12 and a half and 13. Right, so that, I was surprised, like I said in the first video, I was surprised that the 70-70 was at the bottom of the scale. That's kind of where you first start to see cigars get a little softer with humidity. But I expected it to be in the middle, but it was more towards the bottom, which surprised me. But doing this research, I mean, that's exactly why I was doing this check, because I want to see, what does that actually mean? What do cigars feel like at 11? What do they feel like at 12? What do they feel like at 12 and a half, 13, so on and so forth? And basically, because of that 4%, I decided to lower the range and increase the lower range, because I feel like that'll just encompass more, and it's more dangerous when you get up into 14 and a half, 15 area. 15 starts to introduce the slightest bit of bitterness, and it only gets worse from there. And there's 14 and a half to 15, there's not really a reason to go into that area. I've smoked a lot at 14 and a half, smoked a lot at 14, smoked a lot at 13. I've smoked probably the most around 11 to 12, because when I started out, I didn't realize what RH meant. And so I just set my humidor to 65. And so it was like 65, 70 most of the time. And 65, 70 is, I actually don't know what that is, but 70, 70 is roughly 13. So that's obviously lower. But I can figure that out in just a second. I want to show you. So back to what I was saying at first, the main reason we need to talk about cigar smoking, at least in my opinion, in absolute humidity, is because there are so many different numbers that can arrive at the same absolute humidity. So for instance, the best example of this is if you have 72 degrees and 75% RH, you will have 14 absolute humidity. If you have 73 and 70%, you will have 14. It's a 5% difference and a 1 degree difference. Literally, because from 72 to 73 degrees, the air can hold 5% more water. That's why it works that way. And it only goes higher, so it only gets more extreme. Now let's show the calculator real quick. So the reason why we have to talk about things this way. So let's get you over here, and we're gonna look at this guy, try to get the shine out of the way. And so I'm just gonna show you some examples of that shine. Some examples of why we need to talk about an absolute humidity versus a temperature and a percent. So right now, let's say we're aiming for 14. And so I guess we'll start at 72 and let's get close to 14. So that's really close. 72, 72, that damn shine. And we got 14. Now let's say we're a little cooler. Let's go down to 68. And then let's raise this up to 14. Wow, convenient. 68.81. And now let's say somebody's house is really cold. Like say it's the middle of winter in a house in like Minnesota. I would run into something like this. That means I would have to run, to get to 14 at least, I would have to run like a 65-91. So in this case, 91 is super high humidity, but obviously it's still just 14. So in my case in the winter, I'm going to want to try to maintain something more, up in these ranges so I can more easily keep my humidity 68, 81. That's still like a high number, but I mean, what are you going to do? You got to get to 14, right? And so if I was running 72, then I would have to go down to roughly 72, 72. Anyways, you get the idea, right? So that is why when we talk about humidity in our cigars, we need to talk with both numbers so you can figure out that number. And then even then, I would love to see us eventually get to a point where we can talk about absolute humidity numbers. Obviously, I needed a tool like this to bridge the gap because we can't do this without this calculator, and that math's a pain. Last time I went into the details of why that math is a pain. Ultimately, it's not really important. And then why humidity works the way that it does with cigars is the moisture in the cigar fights the ember temperature, and so it keeps your ember temperature lower, which keeps the smoke that you pull in lower and allows you to taste more flavors. That's all there is to it. So like there's little tiny tricks you can do. Like for instance, I talked with I really wish I could remember his name, Johnny Taquitos, I think, from the Privada Club, over Twitter, and he mentioned he puts his cigars in the fridge before he smokes them because he's in Florida, it's super hot and humid, and it's really clever. So what it does, and he even mentioned this, he said in the last third it kind of stops working and then I have a hard time. It works because the cigar, you're not changing the humidity. He mentioned that the fridge dehumidifies, which they do. That's correct. But they dehumidify because they're lowering the temperature of the air, and that air at a colder temperature can hold less humidity, so it sucks moisture out of the air, literally. And it dries out whatever's in there. Just a natural byproduct of lowering the temperature. The reason this works with his smokes, and it's funny, but it works, right? And that's all that matters. It's because the cigar's colder, so when you draw, it does the same thing I've been talking about, where your draw into your mouth is colder, so you can taste more temperatures. Like I was saying in the beginning, you can perceive more flavor. It works. So, but that's why it works, and that's also why it fails in the last third, because the cigar warms up being in the ambient temperatures, versus with humidity, it takes like 2 to 6 hours at least for a cigar to acclimate to humidity. And it depends on density and stuff like that. Of course, it depends on the size of the cigar, but that's the rate they acclimate. So typically when you smoke a cigar, the humidity within the cigar remains long enough that you're fine. And that's also generally true of like when you burn the cigar, the heat being drawn through the cigar over time will, because you smoke for like 2 hours in some cases, right? And so that will also dry out the cigar too. So I'm getting high on time again. I didn't want to get up here, but anyways, this is better. Range, we need to talk in absolute humidity if possible. I know it's going to catch on really slow, but range is 12.5 to 14.5. I'm going to adjust, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to adjust the code to reflect that in the calculator. Yeah, I think that's better and safer. But I like to keep on top of these things as I discover the nuances. I like to be on my toes to show you guys the new information that I figured out. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully it's useful. Hopefully it helps. That's it. So, later.